Welcome, this is Carrie Schell from Quilter. Electric Quilt does not do rotary cutting charts for folded corners. However, I will share with you how you can create your own cutting charts using Electric Quilt 8. We are going to take this quilt that I designed in Electric Quilt and turn the blocks into folded corner blocks. So let's just take a look at the quilt. Notice that I used a horizontal layout, and in the layout tab the blocks are 10 inches. And let's just go to print and export, because if we look at the border, the pieced blocks in the border are 3 by 3 inches. So let's start with the first block. Note that this one is 10 inches. Select the Design tab. Under Block Tools, find the eyedropper and select the block. And then under this block, I'm going to right-click and select Edit Block. In the Precision toolbar, change the block width and height to the size from the quilt, which is 10 by 10. Select Print and Export, followed by Rotary Cutting. And let me just do a preview on that. And if we zoom in, the first thing we can see is that piece B doesn't have rotary cutting because it has too many sides to it. So EQ doesn't consider patch B to be rotary cuttable. And then for the corners, it has half square triangles. Now, if we're going to do a folded corner block, we're going to have all squares and rectangles. So let's go ahead and close this. First, we will turn the background into a square. Notice that the finished size of the background piece would be 10 by 10 inches, which is the finished size of the block. The cut size would be calculated by adding a ½ inch both horizontally and vertically, so 10.5 by 10.5. For the corners, if you look at the ruler, we can see that the triangles are 3 inches both horizontally and vertically. That means the finished size for our squares to add folded corners is going to be 3 inches. The unfinished size, we're going to add our magic ½ inch, is going to be 3.5 inches. Then print out the block image and make note of the cut sizes. Now let's go back to our quilt work table and let's do one of the border blocks. And so with the eyedropper tool, I'm going to select the block and I'm going to right click and select Edit Block. Now I'm going to change the block width and height to 3 inches. This was the finished size of the block in the quilt. Select Print and Export. Select Rotary Cutting, followed by Preview. While all the pieces can be rotary cut, they all involve angles, and the measurements all go to the 1/8 inch. Cutting and piecing for this unit would be much simpler with folded corners. In a folded corner unit, the red pieces would be the base units. And the finished size of that red rectangle would be 1.5 inches horizontally and 3 inches vertically. So that means the unfinished size, or the cut size, would be 2 inches by 3.5. For each of the corners, note that the finished size is 1.5 by 1.5, and we're going to add a ½ inch, so that means the cut size for our 4 folded corners is going to be 2 inches square. Then print out a copy of the block and manually note the new cutting instructions. Now let's go back to our quilt work table and let's use the eyedropper tool, find our Flying Geese log cabin block, and we can right click and select Edit Block, and we're going to change the size to 10 by 10. Then select Print and Export. Select Rotary Cutting and do a preview. All of the pieces in this block are rotary cuttable, but they all have some unusual angles and unusual measurements which would make it a little bit of a challenge to cut. The pieces would be much easier to cut if we used folded corners. Start with the center patch and note that the finish size, according to the rulers, is 2 inches horizontal and vertical. Therefore, the cut size will be 2.5 inches horizontal and vertical. Rather than adding triangles to the first 2 sides, we're going to add rectangles, and we're going to use the finish size of 1 by 2 or a cut size of 1.5 by 2.5. The next set of logs, which are going to be on the top and the bottom, are going to have a finish size of 1 by 4 or a cut size of 1.5 by 4.5. To the first set of logs, we're going to add folded corners in all 4 corners. Now these red geese, according to the rulers, measure 2 inches finished. Adding seam allowances, it means we're going to cut 2.5-inch squares. Now we're going to add another set of logs around the center. The left and the right logs are going to be 4 by 1 finished, or 4.5 by 1.5 unfinished, and the top and the bottom are going to be 6 by 1 finished with a cut size of 6.5 by 1.5. Add flying geese units to the 4 corners. Those will be cut 2.5 inches square. Use the same process to add logs and flying geese corners to the next 2 rounds of this block. Using the information, create your new rotary cutting chart utilizing folded corner information. One additional note: the blocks that work best for this technique are those that have patches with 45-degree angles. They are much easier to convert to the folded corner technique. Thanks so much for watching. If you would like the cutting charts as displayed in this video, please check out my related blog post at www.onpointquilter.com. Sign up for my newsletter to receive regular tips and techniques for using Electric Quilt 8.